Sorry, I was not muted. Yadira, whenever you're ready to get us started with our opening statement.
Great, thank you, Angela. Yat e anotso she ya Yadira Kavioti Yanishia. Look at the net initially ado nakai bashichin nash ejetopaha e dashache ado nakai dashanele. Vita ist eat de nasha ado Tucson de cashed e. Akut ego the net is initially. Hello and good afternoon. I have just properly introduced myself in my Navajo language, as we are the five-fingered beings. I've always been taught by my grandparents to always properly introduce yourself anytime you are meeting new people. So good afternoon to our Confluence Center community who are either joining us either on Zoom or Facebook Live. On behalf of the Confluence Center for Creative Inquiry at the University of Arizona, we welcome you all to our second virtual show and tell event for the fall semester. This afternoon, our event is titled Fronteridades on the Border, Placemaking and Representation. We are excited to hear from the three panelists who are recipients of the 2021 Fronteridades on the Border microgrant program. They will share their creative expression and insights on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic has had on us and the communities around us. So before I begin, I would like to mention that we are in a current moment of transition. We have to continue to understand and listen of the longstanding history and stories that has brought you to reside on the land. The land is part of who we are. It is part of our past, our current, and our future. We should try to carry these respectfulness of the people who have been here thousands of generations and will continue for generations to come. If we can take the moment to acknowledge the University of Arizona is located on the native homelands of the Tohono O'odham Nation and the lands of the Pasquayaqui tribe, they are the ones whose care and keeping of these lands has allowed us to be here today. Whether you are joining us here in Tucson, in the surrounding area of the Salt River Valley, including the Akamo O'odham Pima or the Peepaw Maricopa Indian communities, or in other areas of place in relation to the original people of the land, it is imperative that we continue to carry these reflections where you currently reside. And we need to build our mindfulness of our present participation. So before we jump into announcements and introductions, I would like to go over a few housekeeping updates for this afternoon. Each community panelist will present for about 8 minutes. And after the presentation, we will open it up for Q&A. But feel free to address questions at any time in the chat box located at the bottom of the screen or in the comment box on Facebook Live. We will try our best to get them answered at the end of the presentations. So, all right, I would like to introduce you to Javier Durand, who is the director of the Confluence Center for Creative Inquiry and professor of Latin American and Border Studies, who will introduce our presenters for this afternoon. So, Ahihat, thank you.
Thank you, Yadira. Before I welcome everyone, I would like us to pause for a moment and take a moment of silence to remember all of those who we have lost during this pandemic and to think about the pain and suffering of many members of our communities and also of the possibilities as we move forward in terms of getting out of these difficult times. I'll take a few seconds for us to reflect, a short moment of silence. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Bienvenidos a todos to one more show and tell. This week, 9 years ago, we had our first show and tell at the Playground Bar in downtown Tucson, in a moment when downtown was facing an important transformation. Now Emeritus Professor Ward Jackson Bowles presented about his art, and that episode began one of the long-lasting events of the Conference Center, an event deeply rooted in creativity and community. Thank you, Tucson and U of A community, for all your support. And my sincere thanks to the Conference Center team, which makes all of this possible. Angela Martinez, Jasmine Vasquez, Yadira Caballero, Cristian Rubalcaba, Valeria Tapia, and Drew Batia are the members of our team. Thank you. Muchas gracias. Some announcements. So we have a Borderlands Fellowship, and we have a link posted to our Zoom chat here for a new opportunity for grad students, U of A grad students interested in border studies. This is part of our larger Border Lab initiative, and the application deadline is October 25th. Please check it out. In better news, we received a National Endowment of the Humanities grant, $400,000, and this funding will allow us for a cross-institutional collaboration with the University of Arizona Press, the Alfred Norville Gem and Mineral Museum downtown, and the Writing Skills Improvement Program in the College of Humanities. And it is the start of a new project that we call Reclaiming Cultural Heritage in the Borderlands. The goals behind the grant encompass achieving greater support for research that elevates local heritage and historically excluded narratives, expanded public access to cultural spaces and resources, and strengthening humanities and academic skills programs for the University of Arizona's underrepresented student populations. So we're thrilled with those news. And finally, in terms of announcements, save the date. On November 3rd, we will have our next Fronteridades lecture, and we will have two speakers, Professor Sonia Robles from the University of Delaware and Professor Monica de la Torre from Arizona State University. Both will speak on their experiences, on the experiences of women and communities in transborder radio. This panel will be in collaboration with our local community radio KXCI. More details to come, and stay tuned for more information. And now I'm happy to welcome our moderator, Dominic Valencia Calza, who will introduce our speakers. Dominic, thank you for agreeing to moderate this panel. Dominic Calza, pronounced she, her, ella, currently serves as the director of the Adalberto and Ana Guerrero Student Center at the University of Arizona, where she supports the recruitment, retention, and community readiness of Latinx students. She received both her BA in psychology and her MS in Mexican American Studies from the U of A. Dominic is a community educator who has served students and families for the past 18 years in the areas of mental and behavioral health, substance use and misuse, suicide prevention, sexual health, equitable education, and indigenous cultural awareness. Dominic is committed to the educational advancement and holistic well-being of minoritized communities in these desert lands, which has lived and loved throughout her life. She likes to spend her time watching movies and going on road trips with her partner and their two kids. And she's doing a wonderful job as director of the Guerrero Center. With that, Dominic, welcome, thank you, and take it away.
Thank you so much, Javier, for the introduction, and thank you to the Compliment Center team for the invitation. I feel really honored to be able to introduce the presenters for this show and tell Pandemia Diario. So we'll start with Lori McKenna. Is a community artist who is an executive director of Central School Project, an arts nonprofit in Bisbee, Arizona. Her project, Aggregate, is named after a material used to build the border wall, which commenced in our community right as we began to experience the spread of COVID-19. McKenna states of her project, I would like to expand a body of work that captures the trauma, isolation, and anxiety of my pandemic experience, which shares my personal coping mechanisms this past year, which also captures parallel events using the word aggregate as a means to contain my process and storytelling. The next presenter, Alejandro Macias, is an assistant professor at University of Arizona School of Art. His project, Everything and Nothing at Once, is a series of 2D paintings addressing themes of heritage, immigration, and ethnicity, which are set in contrast to critical engagement with the assimilation and acculturation process, often referred to as Americanization. These works were exhibited in a solo show at the Tucson Museum of Art. So at this time, I'm going to pass it over to Lori McKenna to begin your presentation.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I have known of the Confluence Center for years, and it was fascinating to me. It was a daydream, of course, like, well, maybe I should go get my master's, you know, but life keeps me busy, and I just admire the work that the whole program of cross-disciplinary study and really focusing on the culture that was first here, and I have friends that have studied at U of A, and I just can't tell you how humbling and what an honor this is for me. And I saw the announcement about submitting work or proposals, and it just matched so perfectly what I had going on, which was basically using every means at hand to get through the pandemic and isolation by drawing and taking pictures and taking notes. So basically, I was journaling at a level that I generally don't give myself the time to do. And I had just was almost obsessively drawing and writing notes and taking pictures. I just knew that it was important, and I didn't know what would happen. So it was a magical match that I could maybe somehow transpose it into something coherent that could be shared with people. And I did originally think I would make something that was a little more static than what happened. I was impulsively wanting it to go to a level of video, so I made a rough video to submit, and I'm excitedly working on it at a pretty slow pace because I work full-time as an arts administrator. So that's what I'll tell you before showing it. I do want to say that it is really about the core personal space being assaulted by the what I saw as horrifying with our government, and with everything that gets revealed, and the dark. It's very dark. I captured very dark things. So it's almost like I want to warn people, and that it is dark. So I will share my screen and see you on the other side. It's 2 minutes and 25 seconds, I think. Okay. Stop the share. So one of the most horrifying things for me last year was in April, the border wall was being built everywhere, but there was a headquarters in Bisbee working, building the wall in Douglas and building the wall west of Bisbee over the San Pedro River. And I was driving into town every day, and every morning I saw these trucks filled with aggregate. They were barreling down the road that went right past my house. I live 14 miles from Bisbee and in double adobe. And about 400 workers were brought from all over the country. And I could just every morning I woke up to the sound of diesel semi trucks going down the road, either empty or full with the aggregate, which is dirt and material to make cement. And it was just hard, like I felt so, even though this has always been a problem, always been an issue, it just felt like such a horrible assault on humanity to see it happening every day and during the pandemic. And so that I felt like there was nowhere to turn. And I felt very helpless. And like, so the drawing and writing basically kept me going. And I just it almost was like for everyone in the country, there's this existential crisis happening. And I felt fortunate, but also had guilt for having a safe job. And I just couldn't believe what was unfolding. And a lot of the drawings that I did do were right from the newscasts of watching the Black Lives Matter protests. And again, wanting to be there, but knowing that I couldn't go anywhere. I just knew that I had to make art out of what was happening. It's a documentation, or, abstracted documentarian. So I decided to, find more material that for sound that kind of captured the endless grinding of all of us. And I found that sound from a quarry that crushes rock for making cement. You know, I think pretty happy with how the project is going. I have been stalled a couple times because it's a revisiting of a very specific dark period, and there's new darkness now, but it's really helping me to make this piece so it can stand alone and as a projected piece, or it can be in a larger installation piece that I do have envisioned, kind of focusing on the complete juxtaposition of how I turn to my actual very small environment in the desert and the animals, and tuning into somehow trying to help them in order to stay grounded. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Lori, for sharing your journaling and your drawing and your project in a way that gives us that insight into your life and what you were feeling during that time. Thank you for sharing that.
Thanks.
I'm going to pass it over to Alejandro to share with us a little bit of his project.
Sorry, it's got a little dark. I don't have a lot of natural light here, but first of all, thank you for even inviting me to be part of this. And it's such a pleasure to talk to you all about my work. And again, thank you for the generous support of the Confluence Center for helping me make this body of work possible, and obviously helping me out, making my work become a possibility at the Tucson Museum of Art, where I had this body of work exhibiting. So I have a lot of images. I have like 24, 25 images. So I'm going to kind of like steamroll through these as quickly as I can. And then I probably won't be able to get into specifics too greatly, but I can always address specific works towards the end. But just to kind of supply some context, I was born and raised in Brownsville, Texas, along the U.S. Mexico border. I was lived there professionally and personally up until 2019, when I moved to Tucson, Arizona, for my position at the School of Art, where I now teach two-dimensional art, specifically painting and drawing. And but I also wanted to kind of also provide some info on some of the artists that kind of inspired the work that I'm making. Most of them are Texas artists, and I happen to know them also personally. And so Vincent Valdez was one of them, and I was just kind of really taken aback by his work in terms of his technical ability. I feel like he's a contemporary master in my eyes. And so I think that's what kind of I gravitated towards in the beginning, but then, conceptually, and then his ideas that kind of revolved around the social political environment and what was happening in the U.S. In a very contemporary sense was kind of what kind of cemented me in his work, and specifically the Strangest Fruit series, where he was affected by the lynching of Mexican Americans from the mid 1800s to the early 1900s, and kind of put his own personal friends as the subjects of these works. And so just to kind of talk about the oppression of Latinos still face in contemporary America. And then Cesar Martinez, who was also one of the leading figures of the Chicano art movement, who I also happen to know. And I was really kind of interested in his Bato series and Pachuco and Ruca series, where he kind of tends to focus on the figure as well, but also focus on, he was inspired by abstract expressionism, color field painting, and how it kind of uses color as a way to talk about the variety of colors of Chicanos, and also as a way to kind of give the figure a space to exist. And so, and just his technique and ability was also really kind of something that I was really interested in. And then last but not least was also my mentor, who taught me how to paint back in 2006. And I think he was the driving force behind my work, and the major influence that I had when I was kind of in studying. And he was born in Mexico City and migrated and was raised in the Rio Grande Valley. And so I felt, I felt like we were kind of mirroring one another in terms of our own existence, living alongside the border, specifically Brownsville. And I was really kind of taken aback by how he used, like, specifically the setup design, which is a Mexican textile design, and how he incorporated it into his work. And so you see a lot of these three artists kind of echoing through my work. And then back in 2016, I kind of made it a mission again. I think this is when I was really kind of interested in the work of Vincent Valdez and his technical ability. But I started to kind of think about conceptually, how am I going to put my own stamp on the figure, and bring something that feels personal to me, but also says something kind of timely, and about my experience living in the border. And so I started to kind of included this division within the work as a way to reflect not only my own identity, but something that is happening between two countries, this kind of cultural contrast and this kind of internal conflict that I personally deal with, along with a lot of other people in this country. So I was doing like studies of people that I knew personally, and kind of trying to figure out where I was going with this work, and using the figure as a vessel to kind of talk about identity. And so eventually I made this work called Nopal en la Frente, and I made a variety of versions, and it kind of reflects like a saying that I heard from my own mother as I was growing up, because my first language is Spanish, and I can still speak it, but not as well as I can English. And so English started to kind of slowly take over, and I started to articulate my ideas and thoughts through English, and also kind of really kind of embrace like American pop culture. But I think my mother took notice of me kind of distancing myself from my culture and my kind of upbringing. And so Nopal en la Frente was a phrase that was often used in my household as a way for my mom to even be critical of me as if I'm turning my back on my own culture. And it wasn't something that was kind of like consciously happening. It was just something that it just was. And it wasn't until I got older that I started to kind of realize that what assimilation was, and I think the work helped me kind of navigate around those ideas and that kind of experience. If it wasn't for the work, I don't think I'd be conscious of it even today about what really kind of happened in when I was younger. And then again, like, often reflecting, I think the three artists that I mentioned gave me the courage to kind of respond to the social political climate. And so I was obviously responding to the presidential elections, the most recent ones. This was done in 2017. I was interested in the kind of contrast between the Make America Great slogan as a way, how it tended to be kind of perceived as anti-color and anti-immigration. But then even in Brownsville, there seemed to be a rise of Latinos who were voting for Trump. So I was interested in documenting the kind of phenomenon and that kind of contrast, for me, what felt like a contrast in the Rio Grande Valley. And then again, using the setup textile design very often in my work. Also, like kind of started to kind of create separation between some of the works that I was making as a way to comment about the separation between Texas and Mexico specifically. And again, the kind of distancing of my heritage and culture. And so here you have me kind of covering myself with the American flag and then separating myself from the serape. And again, this is another study of a friend of mine who I've known for a while, and so she's also Peruvian and German, so she deals with this like multicultural conflict and dealing with identity very often, but was also born and raised in the border, and so I wanted to kind of focus on that as well, and then again using that cut, but in a much more distinct way as a way to talk about the river that separates Texas and Mexico. And then from here on, you're going to see a lot of the work that was at the TMA, and so much of this work talks about identity. It's a very personal show, and again, talking about how I can often this work is a lot about code switching and be able to kind of even hide within different cultural groups, and then especially because of my white skin, I'm able to kind of camouflage in many ways around a white group, but then understand where people of color come from, and people from a diverse and diverse and cultural backgrounds as well. So this is kind of a work kind of documenting that, and also my transition from Texas to Arizona, which is very recent, and so you have this kind of Arizona landscape in the background. This is probably the one that was like also not really, this was a bit more distant from the personal approach from that show, but it was mostly about also kind of documenting what was happening in these recent presidential elections. But I didn't want to bring the MAGA slogan in this case, and I wanted it to be a much more kind of positive approach. And so, still incorporating the red cap, but obviously saying immigrants make America great. And then kind of reinforcing the idea that, this country was built by immigrants, and the beauty of immigrants is what makes this country great. So I think it's, again, much of the same approaches that I've kind of used in the past, but kind of taking liberties with my approach. I'm going to kind of fast forward with some of these. And then the setup and design is still very present in the work, but it's not just kind of like linear. I do different compositions. And again, I made like 3 kind of different works that dealt with, again, the concept of nopal en la frente. And this is taking from a childhood photo as a way to kind of talk about, the assimilation process taking root as a child. And so and I took kind of different nopales and different approaches, aesthetic approaches, and artistic choices that kind of were varied between these 3 works. Let me go. Yeah, and this is another one. And then obviously kind of hinting at things that deal with American pop culture. Again, you have this kind of hybrid of an American icon, Captain America, which is kind of the symbol of what an American is, or what an American patriot is, kind of contrasting with the Incredible Hulk, who is also a hero, but seen as a villain and misunderstood. And I'm echoing some of the ideas that my mentor kind of also talked about as a way to talk about how immigrants are often seen as villains or invaders and are often misunderstood. And then again, this is another one where this is very Texas focused, where I'm from, obviously, and bringing to light some of this kind of some of these like cultural and American icons, America's team, and then how often Texas, like specifically Brownsville, was crazy about Cowboys and still is, obviously, and even seeing every Sunday how people tended to unite through a team, and it was interesting to me to see an American team unite people despite their political differences and their cultural differences. But again, this was interesting because 95% of the population in Brownsville is Mexican American. So it was interesting to see these people kind of embrace America's team and celebrate it. And then this is, again, like just to kind of briefly, is a work about my own transition. and leaving my whole family behind to move to Texas for this position, or to move to Arizona for this position, and using this kind of negative space as a way to kind of remove myself from one location and then place myself in a different, but still along the borderlands. But it's also kind of as a way to talk about, you know, even though my transition was very difficult on a personal level, again, it's never even really anything compared to the journey of migrants and how they put everything on the line to survive. And sometimes they don't, especially here in the Arizona desert, where a lot of them disappear and don't make it through. And so this is just coming from like a personal level. And then I wanted to pay tribute to my mentor who, you know, if it weren't for him, I wouldn't be in this position at all. He was the first person to give me an academic position. And so I wanted to make sure he had his own space in the TMA show. Again, including this kind of physical cut within the work, as again, to reflect this division that kind of I'm completely affected by, and I am a product of this division. And just to kind of talk about the complexity of this division. And then just to briefly, this is some of the work that I've done this year using found objects, again, including this division. This is my grandfather, a portrait of my grandfather when he was younger. You know, I really want to elaborate on this, but I don't think I have time. And this is a portrait of a trans woman who went missing along the border, and who I was also affected by when I would visit downtown and I saw missing posters and I saw nothing being done about it. And then again, I think I even took it very personally just because my brother is gay. And so, you know, I think growing up as a gay person in the border and just America in general can be a very difficult upbringing. And he didn't come out until he was in his early 20s, I think. And so I even hesitated even making this work for a long time, for years. She's been missing for, I think, 4 years, I think, at this point. And so, but I felt like I wanted to make a work that memorialized her in some way, but even kind of include the kind of the hidden aspect of what happened to her. Like, you know, I don't think police were really doing much about her disappearance at all. And you know, it's a shame to kind of see it you know, almost forgotten. And so I'm in many ways, I'm trying to memorialize her through the work. I don't know if I did that successfully, but it's something that I wanted to do. And then I just did this one. I literally just finished it last night. And I was really kind of thinking about people in positions of power, you know, gatekeepers. Obviously, this is a reference to what happened in Del Rio, horsemen, Border Patrol horsemen, you know, aggressively turning Haitians back and being aggressive towards them. And these kind of watchmen that watch over this line and this border, and then people in these positions taking advantage of their power. And so, and they're being watchful and surveilling this division, but then who's watching them? And then how do we hold these people accountable for these actions? And so, but yeah, I hope I didn't take too much time, but I'm happy to talk further about this work.
Thank you, Alejandro, especially for that, you know, that your personal story of that identity process through that space and place that we can see in your work. Thank you for that. So our next presenter, I'm going to give a brief introduction. Elena Vega is a visual artist specializing in mosaics who created Nogi Town Coloring Book, a coloring book for all ages that celebrates Vega's hometown of Ambos Nogales. She describes that through the coloring book format, el lector se convierte en parte del libro, dándole colores propios a estos paisajes, un ejercicio de reconocimiento de nuestros espacios y de esparcimiento al colorearlo. So translation, the reader becomes part of the book, giving these landscapes their own colors, an exercise of recognition of our spaces and of recreation when coloring. Thank you for being here, Elena. I'll pass it over to you.
Hola, pues, sorry for my Spanish, pero muchas gracias, por compartir, muchas gracias al Conference Center que, pues, no hubiera pasado nada si no hubiera sido por estas fronteridades, ¿no? Estos pandemiliarios, y pues, platicarles del Nogi Town Coloring Book, que es una idea. Voy a compartirles la pantalla. Es una idea que nació hace muchos años. Bueno, ahí están viendo las fotografías que son desde el 2018, 2019, pero la gran mayoría fueron tomadas en la pandemia. Y son fotografías que relatan la cotidianidad de estas ambas ciudades, ¿no? Estas ciudades hermanas. No sé cómo poner, ahí está. No solo son fronterizas como el primer cuadro de la ciudad, sino también son paisajes más al sur de Nogales, Sonoras, más para la periferia, donde también transcurre mucho de la ciudad, ¿no? Que somos una ciudad industrial y la parte industrial de nuestra ciudad está alejada de las rejas, ¿no? Entonces, creo que también era importante retratar esa convivencia de lo que es la frontera y lo que son las ciudades mismas, ¿no? Al vernos en pandemia, pensando como en las formas de entretenernos en casa, en los momentos de esparcimiento que podríamos tener ahora en casa, ¿no? A fuerzas por no salir del COVID, yo transformé estas fotografías en lo que son los dibujos que conforman el libro de colorear. Como decía la descripción, pues sí, tratando de que al colorear uno sienta pertenencia de esos espacios que en el momento pues no podemos recorrerlos tal cual, estos paisajes, pues al menos sentirnos todavía cercanos a ellos, de poder colorearlos en nuestra casa, ¿no? Porque mucha parte del proyecto del libro de colorear era que llegara por correo. Bueno, estuvo llegando por correo a quienes lo solicitaban. Hacían una dinámica y se les pasaba la dirección y por correo postal llegaba el libro, ¿no? Pues para evitar el hecho de, pues, presentaciones en vivo y todas estas cosas que la pandemia nos quitó, ¿no? En mi caso, por ejemplo, compartirles la historia de que los libros para llegar a Tucson, fue mucha aventura porque era por correo. Yo aunque esté ya vacunada, no puedo cruzar, todavía la frontera no está abierta solo para casos esenciales y residentes, ¿no? Pero para otras cosas como compras o lo más cotidiano todavía no podemos cruzar. Entonces yo no pude cruzar al correo postal que está a metros de la línea para enviar los paquetes, ¿no? Entonces también esto refleja mucho de irónicamente, de todo lo que tuvo que vivir el proyecto, ¿no? Con el cerrado de líneas, ¿no?
Disculpe, Elena, vamos a dejar que traduzca Christian para los que hablan inglés.
Okay, so I'm just going to translate in the first person from Elena's perspective. Elena says this was an idea that was born many years ago. These photos go back to 2018, 2019, but the majority of them were taken during the pandemic. They are photographs that relate the day-to-day life of the sister cities of Nogales, Sonora, and Arizona. They are not just of the border, they also include southern landscapes in Nogales at the periphery of the city, and they capture the industrial aspect of the city, which is far from the border. And I thought it was important to capture the distinction between the border and the industrial aspect. Being at home during the pandemic, I turned these photographs into drawings. These represent landscapes we cannot be in physically, but we can be closer to them by coloring them in. A big part of this project is that the books would be sent by mail. People would ask for books and they would receive it through the mail to avoid in-person presentations or interaction. One story is trying to get the books to Tucson. Even though I am vaccinated, I cannot cross the border. Since it's closed, it is not open to regular crossers. I couldn't cross to the post office, which is a few meters from the border, and this ironically reflects all the challenges that this project has faced.
Pues eso era compartirles más que nada la historia del libro en el viaje que tuvo que hacer o cómo tuvo que hacer este viaje a partir de las restricciones, ¿no? Por la pandemia, pero que al fin y al cabo, pues el libro ya está circulando, ya está en Tucson, ha viajado incluso hasta Veracruz. Hay personas en Veracruz que me pidieron libros, en el Estado de México. Entonces es muy bello que un libro de paisajes esté recorriendo los paisajes que por el COVID yo o muchos de los nogalenses pues no hemos podido recorrer, ¿no? Y pues esa es la historia, ¿no? de este libro. Les digo, estas son las fotografías. Es un libro relativamente corto, son dibujos y pues eso, invitarlos a que si todavía hay copias y quieren uno, pues están todavía a disposición, ¿no?
I just wanted to share the journey of this book in spite of the restrictions came up through because of the pandemic. The book is now circulating in Tucson and it has even reached Veracruz and the state of Mexico. It is beautiful that a landscape book is passing through those same landscapes that I and other Nogalenses cannot travel. The book is relatively short, mainly drawings, and I would like to invite you all to check it out. And if you want one, there are still some available.
Muchísimas gracias, Elena. Nomás te quería dar las gracias personalmente también porque yo nací en Nogales, tengo mi familia ahí y es muy bonito pues ver un poquito de ver estas fotos y también pensar en mi propia historia familiar, ¿no? Y mi pertenencia a esas tierras. Entonces, muchísimas gracias por eso también. So thank you, Elena, for sharing a bit of your project with us as well. And I think at this time we are opening it up for questions. So feel free to add some questions into the chat or use the Q&A function as well. And we have our first question, which is for Lori. How has the pandemic affected the artist and creative community in Bisbee? And what have been some of their responses to these challenges?
Thanks for that. At first it was, and it was, people were really in shock, but people quickly banded together and responding, and then where we were to events that we couldn't address, like when the protests, people we kind of started up guerrilla postering, where everyone decided to be able, I thought about doing like, let's do an online show, like as an arts nonprofit, like get an online show together. And it just seemed no, let's just use the street. Like, let's do guerrilla postering and get the word out. So artists really had things to draw and things to say, and it went up all, went over where we usually put posters for events, like on telephone poles, and then we did another one, a mask series, where everyone drew or made art about masks. And the city itself, like as we've gotten further away from the when it broke out, the people of Bisbee are over 80% vaccinated, and that was really a great thing to have occur. But one thing that did happen was, I really think that people had to face that they had created a social life that was driven, that their art making was entwined with a social life. And everyone had to kind of measure what, they had to hang on, or they had to reflect. I had conversations with people where they reflected on the fact that they actually had avoided a lot of art making before the pandemic. So that was interesting. But there was a lot of contention. There were some scary confrontational things with people coming to try to start trouble in Bisbee, because it's known as the liberal town, and people, Trump supporters came with we had a day where, everything was locked down. Stores and shops wanted to close regardless of what the governor said. And so most everything was closed for months and months. And there were a couple of places that were open with strict masking signs, and you couldn't walk in. And so we had people come, like, walk up and down the streets with guns and their Trump flags and have a little, demonstration at a pullout on Highway 80. But people were not intimidated. It didn't start anything. They were not given the attention they were asking for. I think that's about it.
Thank you, Lori.
Yeah.
Another question. Esta pregunta va para ti, Elena. ¿Cómo podemos comprar tu libro? Y también me gustaría saber dónde puedo ver más de tu trabajo.
Pues el libro, de hecho, es regalo. Ahí quedan algunas copias y se reparte por una dinámica en Instagram. Tiene una página de Instagram que es Noggy Town Coloring Book, y ahí por inbox, ¿no? Más que nada se pone de acuerdo, porque coloreas una hoja y mandas una fotito y ya con tu correo postal, porque llega por correo postal. Ahí puede haber trabajo también en mi Instagram, que es Elena Vega o Eleniux Vega, ahí hay. Y vi otra pregunta ahí que decía de cómo nos afectó a la comunidad creativa la pandemia. Pues, por ejemplo, a mí en lo personal, yo siempre he sido una artista que está como muy en contacto con Nogales, Arizona, con la comunidad artística local de allá, de aquel lado, con la biblioteca, con el consulado de México, ¿no? En Nogales, Arizona. Y pues cerrando la frontera, ya no pude cruzar. O sea, incluso ya no había manera, por ejemplo, de llevar mi obra. Sí hubo una exposición en la que justo lo que nos ayudó fue pues los amigos de aquel lado que sí podían cruzar para acá, o las rejas, no sé, nos pasamos unos cuadros que iba a cruzar un carro un amigo, o con los libros, ¿no? De que una amiga vino, se los llevó a otro amigo de allá, y o sea, las redes de la misma gente fue lo que ha continuado, pero en realidad porque incluso una de las limitaciones para cruzar estaba especificado o ya está especificado como eventos sociales y eventos culturales. O sea, si tú tienes un evento cultural, no puedes cruzar porque no es esencial, ¿no? Entonces, ha sido complicado y pues en espera de que abran para poder.
Gracias, Elena.
Do you want me to
Um,
translate or just move
Yeah, that
on?
would be great, Christian.
Okay. So then it says, for me personally, I'm always closely connected with the artist community in Nogales, Arizona, with the library, the consulate, and when the border closed, I could no longer cross. There was no way to bring my work across. There was an exhibit where friends from the other side could cross into Mexico, and this helped. Or we could pass paintings through the fence or pass them to Arizona through friends of friends and through networks of acquaintances. One of the one of the restrictions for crossing is that you cannot cross for cultural or art events. So it is complicated and I'm waiting for it to open.
Thank you for the translation, Christian. We have still open for any questions. If you want to throw them into the chat or the Q&A function. We are open at this time. And also for the first question, so the coloring book is free, so you can check it out on the Instagram for the Nogi Town Coloring Book, and direct yourself there if you'd like to receive a copy of the coloring book by mail. And this next question is for Alejandro. And something that stands out is the consistent and straightforward delineation between the symbols that represent American culture and the ones that represent your Latinx Mexican heritage. Can you say more about what this recurring theme of neat division or separation represents for you?
That's a big question. Let's see if I can answer that, if I even get close, because that's a packed question. But yeah, well, I mean, I think, again, going back to my practice and trying to figure out what initially I intended to say or do, I knew that for some reason, I was really kind of interested in the figure. And I found myself even in undergrad, really kind of captivated by the abstraction of the figure by British painters. And then I was like, why am I falling down or focusing in on white British painters? And so that was reflecting back, that was kind of interesting to me. And then, and to me, even though they were like already kind of, one was Francis Bacon, for example. He had already passed, so his work, although it feels contemporary, he obviously wasn't. And then you had others like Lucian Freud, who was alive at the time, and then Lucian and Frank Arbach, who is still alive, but he's like in his 90s, like already. And then as I got older, I attended a residency at Vermont Studio Center that kind of changed everything for me. And I think that residency was a sense of validation that I was kind of looking for in terms of like, am I doing something that means something? And so I was around like a lot of artists that were kind of talking about their own experience, young contemporary artists from different backgrounds. I met an artist from Pakistan. I met an artist from London, Spain, Canada, LA, two Texas artists at the time, but from northern part of Texas, all over the US and all over the world. And so I was really kind of interested in their own, I was still lost at that point. I think I got in because I think there was some ability there and potential maybe, But I think in terms of my concepts and ideas, it was nothing. I don't think it felt kind of shallow. And then when I, met those artists, and I was kind of really interested in their own, not only ability, but the fact that they had something to say was really important to me. And I met one painter from the Bronx. Her name was Cheyenne Julian, and she was really young at the time. I think she was 22, but her work was so powerful. And she, she's Black and from Puerto Rico. Her mom is from Puerto Rico, so she's also Latina, and so I was interested in the way she was able to talk about her perspective as a Black American living in America. And I came back a changed man. And then I started kind of changing my ideas. And I was like, why am I not talking about my perspective and my own experience? Because, and I think initially I hesitated because I was like, felt drowned by my own experience. There's a lot of artists already there that we're talking about these issues. There's a lot of like border artists that are making incredible work. But as I started to travel more, I think me leaving the bubble changed me. And then, so I did like a residency in Washington State, where I went to a party, and there was like I think most of the people there were predominantly white. And so I started talking about my work, and they looked at me and they said, well, I would have never guessed that you were from the border, much less Mexican American. And so that also really kind of affected me. And I was like, and I realized that a lot of people don't know anything about the border if they're not from the border. And even people continue to stay ignorant of what's happening in the border, even if they're here. So I took it upon myself to kind of respond to not only the border, but also my own identity. And so through the work, I look back. And again, I don't think, because if I wasn't making the work, I probably would have never looked back. And I would have continued to stay ignorant or not done any research or looked into it further. And so I think this division was not only a way for me to talk about these issues, this kind of internal struggle that I deal with, dealing with assimilation, dealing with wanting to fit in, not feel like an outcast, not feel like an outsider in any sense, but also dealing with the guilt of feeling like you're abandoning your upbringing. And so there, compositionally, it was there, very present. And then I started to include the very clear division, and then using that negative space as a way to talk about that very distinct division and how it's very separated. But then even then, like, even though it feels almost like a diptych, it is still one composition. So they're like separated, but also together at the same time. And I think that is also a reflection of what's happening on the border. And this is kind of very gray area of two cultures clashing and mixing and blending. And so, yeah, that was, that felt obvious to me to kind of, and then like the aesthetic choices, like one is incredibly representational, more grounded to realism. And that side was more of a reflection of what was happening in the community in Brownsville in terms of how people viewed art. And so again, I came from an upbringing where people didn't feel like they could be artists because they felt like, well, I can't be an artist. Like, how is it gonna, put food on the table, and so I didn't know how to do anything else. Like, I just wanted to be an artist, And so I committed myself completely. But I saw that the way people respected the people in Brownsville, the art that they respected was grounded to realism, grounded to representational subject matter, portraits, landscapes, still lives. And I didn't want to strictly just do that. And I wanted to, again, I started thinking of back some of the artists that kind of initially captivated me. And so I wanted to be able to abstract my figures. I wanted to be, even my techniques were abstracted because I think my concepts were very abstract as well. And so these two very contrasting techniques also was a reflection of these feelings that I was having, not only in terms of my own humanity, but how I viewed art as well. And so all that kind of mixed in, and this is the product that you get. So I'm hoping I answered your question.
Yes, yes, definitely. Thank you, Alejandro. And this next question is for everyone, and we'll start with you, Lori, if that's okay. So what is your idea or concept of the borderlands, the border, given where you are now? What would you like people elsewhere to know about the border?
One of the things that I've taken on as a mission since 2007 is I want people to know that that it's militarized and that it's brutal, and that it's not acceptable and should never be considered normal for human beings to live this way. So especially when there are and the thing about the border that I am a part of by having friends in Naco and Douglas and Agua Prieta, and I don't have friends in Naco, Sonora, but my friends in Naco, Arizona have their family in Naco, Sonora. And artists here have created, has just refused to acknowledge the separation. And there's an artist here at Central School that started an arts program in Naco, Sonora. And it's just it's a business as usual thing rather than some sort of special on a pedestal thing. It's just a natural thing that's been going on now for 12 years. But I just feel it's my responsibility to never let people think that you can't, if we're not allowed to see what's inside a detention center, we have to make it our business to show our, personally, my outrage and struggle against it. Yeah, it's a very rich place. The one other thing that I grapple with and have, because I've done other projects that are specifically addressing the border, is to only talk about my experience with it as someone that wants to fight against how wrong things are handled, as opposed to try to tell someone's story that's that experience that can't come across, like for the idea that the coloring book got trapped over in Nogales, Sonora, like the project that humanities and art aren't important enough to come across the line. And I know from friends that every month the announcement is on the 21st of this month, you can come across, and they've been saying that for over a year yeah, I think that covers my feelings on that.
Thank you, Lori.
Yeah.
Y Elena, si quieres compartir sobre la pregunta.
Sí, bueno, ajá. Mi idea de la frontera en Nogales siempre ha sido como mi propia perspectiva, a pesar de todo el movimiento o la problemática que siempre tiene la ciudad. Creo que yo estoy muy enamorada de sus paisajes, de el movimiento urbano, de cómo es la vida. Quizás un poco es característica, es diferente del centro del país y se nota en las personas. Y creo que eso es algo que siempre me gusta compartir. Yo quisiera decirle a los demás que Nogales no es peligroso, pero no puedo decir eso. Pero sí puedo decir que hay cosas muy interesantes en las dinámicas cotidianas que nos dan una identidad muy precisa, ¿no? O muy, pues, característica. Y eso es algo que siempre me gusta compartir en mi obra en general, porque lo siento como parte de mí misma. Yo no me veo como en el común, y precisamente porque siento que crecí con una identidad que va más allá de las fronteras.
Okay, 1 second, I have to finish this. Okay, then it says, my idea of the border or Nogales, or my perspective, is that despite the problems the city has, I think that I am very much in love with its landscapes, with the urban movement, with how life is here. It is unique, it is different from the center of Mexico, and you could tell that in the people. And it is something that I like to share. I would like to tell other people that Nogales is not dangerous, but I can't. But I could see that there's something very different in everyday life here that gives us a very precise, unique identity. And I try to share that in my work because it is like me. I don't see myself as usual, and it is because I grew up here beyond, or I grew up beyond borders.
Gracias, Elena. And Alejandro, do you have any thoughts on the question?
Yeah, just kind of going back at some of the things that I said about it is a kind of a blended place. And for me, I think I wasn't, again, as I was traveling, I became aware of how people perceive the border again as a very, especially when it's like mainstream media talking about it, how it is perceived as a dangerous place and you know, an invasion happening or whatever, you know, and anything that is kind of seen in a bad light. But again, I am a product of the border, and it's a cultural, rich place, you know, and everyone that I love basically is from the border, and you know, and I'm navigating around personally now. Although there are many parallels between what's happening in Arizona and Texas, it's also very different. I think Arizona also deals with its own physical, ecological obstacles, and yeah, I think it is an obstacle for many migrants, but obviously, like they're always seen in such a bad light, and what I try to do with my work, at least, is change people's perceptions of what the border is, and bring a sense of awareness to it. Not only change perception, but again, kind of really highlight the beauty of it, and how these kind of two cultures clash and in many ways become one. And it's difficult to define. And I think that's why I think that negative space in my work exists, because I don't think I can find any distinct definition for what's happening on the border in terms of its people. And so it exists, doesn't exist simultaneously. And so, yeah, I'm only 2 years into Tucson. But what I really do love about this place is the fact that, especially working for a research institution, is how people are so united about bringing awareness to what's happening in this area, and so many different disciplines and practices. And I was in a different meeting with Javier, I think, last week, and I kind of talked about how I've met some of the people in this area, and I'm so interested in their own research and how they kind of bring awareness to what's happening along the border, and I'm excited to even be in this discussion in the first place, and to work with alongside you all. And so, yeah, I love where I'm from. I love that I'm here, and I'm proud to be here and kind of talk about this area and how really, truly beautiful the borderlands are. And so, yeah, I'm not sure I answered the question, but I did my best.
Thank you. Yes, you did. I think you did. But thank you. Muchísimas gracias to you, Lori, Elena, Alejandro, for sharing of yourselves, for sharing of your projects and your works with us here. It's just all very beautiful and very telling in that glimpse into your experiences of the borderlands. So thank you for that. And with that, I will pass it over to Javier.
Muchas gracias, Dominic. Thank you very much. And I also want to highlight a little bit the work that Dominic is doing with the Guerrero Center on campus, which is a vital space and a resource for our students here, our Latinx students, but for all students on campus. And I think if you have an opportunity to, at some point, visit the Guerrero Center and provide support, do that, because it's really a remarkable, like as I said, resource that sometimes we take for granted, and we have to make sure our students and our community know about this. So thank you, Dominic, for your great work. And hablando un poco de las percepciones de la frontera, es interesante los contrastes desde cómo Elena pone esa perspectiva urbana de la frontera, desde Nogales, las dinámicas urbanas y cotidianas, y también los contrastes con la militarización y con la situación complicada que se vive del lado de Estados Unidos. Y un estudioso de la frontera, Heriberto Yepes, había mencionado en algún momento que las fronteras se definían no por la mezcla, sino por las asimetrías y las diferencias, y cómo la gente lidiaba con esas tensiones, ¿no? So asymmetry and tension are, according to Heriberto Yepes, a Tijuana-born scholar, some of these negotiations that the borderlanders need to engage with on a daily basis in order to make sense of that life, which on the US side right now, the militarization and the normalization of the violence it seems to be a given, and there is resistance to that. And on the Mexican side, some of those components exist as well, but the daily urban dynamics are also a challenge in different ways. As we have asymmetric spaces, we're trying to make the best of them. Y aquí estoy mezclando idiomas, ideas, y part of that by bilingual, binational, and hopefully by borderlander language that we're trying to do. Alejandro mentioned a conversation. We are trying to work with an initiative here at the university, the Border Lab initiative, that at some point we hope would be a point of convergence, of confluence for not only scholars and academics, but also community members, artists, and others. And it's taking a while, but we'll get to the point in which we can really use that resource and bring more people together, which is kind of what the conference center mission is all about. So I want to thank you for your work, for your commitment to your work, and also for sharing from personal perspectives how you were able to develop all these excellent images and ideas through a very difficult time. And I also want to make you aware that we're going to have another show and tell in November. More information will be forthcoming. It will be from the Pandemic Diarios production. And with that, again, I want to thank the conference team, Dominic, the presenters, and the audience, and look forward for more events on the conference center. Aquí estamos para servirles. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.